Hello everyone and welcome back to my Information Hub official YouTube channel. In this video, I would like to share all the details regarding 190 visa is a full citizenship and dual nationality pathway visa. Its full name is the Australian Skilled Independent Visa, Subclass 190, and it is a permanent residency visa processed on a state-by-state basis. It is expected that holders will live and work in a nominating state for a period of 2 years. After this period, holders are free to live and work anywhere in Australia. In order to be eligible for the 190 visa, you will need an occupation on Schedule 2 of the Skilled Occupation List, known as the CSOL. An application for a 190 visa will add a further 5 points onto your overall immigration point score. The benefits of this are self-evident, and crucially, if you have a Schedule 1 occupation but fall short by 5 points, a 190 visa application will often be the way forward for your application to succeed. In order to move to Australia on a 190 visa, class applicants must first submit their expression of interest and be invited to apply by a state or territory via a system called Skill Select. It is imperative that the applicant is outside Australia when the visa is applied for, and then when the visa is granted. The 190 visa application process is spread over 3 stages. The first stage of your 190 visa application will be completing a skills assessment set by the relevant skills assessment body for your nominated occupation code. Skills assessment bodies are best described as the gatekeepers of 190 skilled migration, no skills assessment and no visa. The second stage is to submit your formal expression of interest via the Select Skill system. During this expression, you must make an expression to individual states and territories. It makes sense to keep your application as broad as possible, although some prefer to isolate specific states. The final stage is depending on a number of factors and requirements. You will receive an invitation to apply, and at this stage, you are required to submit your finalized and completed application to the Department of Border Protection. Medicals and background checks will be required and your 190 visa can be granted. The following family members can be included: your partner, your or your partner's dependent child. Special conditions apply for dependent children over 18 and still in full-time education, your or your partner's dependent relative. Now, let's talk about what you can with this 190 visa: stay in Australia permanently, work and study in Australia, enroll in Australia's public healthcare scheme, Medicare, sponsor your relatives to come to Australia, travel to and from Australia for 5 years, if eligible, become an Australian citizen. Newly arrived residents may have to wait before they can access certain Australian government payments and benefits. Now, let's talk about how long you can stay in Australia. This is a permanent visa. It lets you stay in Australia indefinitely. The visa has a travel component that expires 5 years after the date of visa grant. You become a permanent resident on the day they grant the visa. For citizenship purposes, your permanent residency starts on the day they grant the visa. If you are in Australia, you enter Australia on this visa. If you are outside Australia, now, let's talk about members of the family unit in your application. You can include members of the family unit in your application. You can include them when you lodge your visa application. Add them after you lodge your application but before they decide on your visa. Family members who apply for the visa must meet their health and character requirements. Family members not accompanying you to Australia might also need to meet their health and character requirements. Now, let's talk about visa cost for applicant. The visa costs 4,240 Australian dollars for the main applicant. There is also a charge for each family member who applies for the visa with you. To work out what your visa will cost, use the visa pricing estimator. You might have to pay an extra charge for any applicant 18 years old or older who has less than functional English. This charge is called the second installment. Pay it only when they ask you to. They ask for the charge only if we are going to grant the visa. The second installment charge for family members is 4,885 Australian dollars. The visa pricing estimator does not include the second installment or other costs. You might also have to pay other costs for health checks, police certificates, and biometrics. Now, let's talk about apply from 190 visa. You can be in or outside Australia when you apply for the visa and when they decide your application, but not in immigration clearance. If you apply in Australia, You must hold a substantive visa or a subclass 010 bridging A visa, a subclass 020 bridging B visa or a subclass 030 bridging C visa, otherwise your application will not be valid. Now, let's talk about processing times. 25% of applications, 87 days, 50% of applications, 7 months, 75% of applications, 18 months. 90% of applications, 36 months. They assess applications on a case-by-case basis, and actual processing times can vary due to individual circumstances including whether you have lodged a complete application, including all necessary supporting documents, how quickly you respond to any requests for additional information, how long it takes to perform required checks on the supporting information provided, how long it takes to receive additional information from external agencies, particularly in relation to health, character, and national security requirements. For permanent migration visa applications, how many places are available in the migration program. You can travel in and out of Australia as many times as you want for 5 years from the date as they grant the visa. After 5 years you will need a resident return, RRV, visa, subclass 155 or 157, to re-enter Australia as a permanent resident. They will digitally link your visa to your passport. You will not get a label in your passport. Now, let's talk about eligibility criteria. 190 visa. You can only apply for this visa if we invite you to submit an expression of interest to let us know you would like to apply for the visa. After you have submitted an EOI, you might be nominated for the visa by a state or territory government. They will only invite you to apply for this visa if you are nominated. Now, let's talk about be nominated. 190 visa. You must have been nominated for this visa by an Australian state or territory government agency. Submit a completed expression of interest in Skill Select. State and territory government agencies can see your completed EOI and might nominate you for the visa. If you are nominated for the visa, they will invite you to apply. All state and territory government agencies have their own criteria for deciding who they will nominate. Contact the state or territory agency directly to find out more about their nomination process and what they want from you. Australian Capital Territory, New South Wales, Northern Territory, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, Western Australia. If the state or territory agency that nominates you withdraws your nomination after you have applied, your application becomes invalid. Now, let's talk about have a suitable skills assessment for Visa 190. For your application to be valid, you must declare that you have a suitable skills assessment at the time of invitation. Delegates of the Minister will now accept a suitable skills assessment for an applicant's nominated skilled occupation which has been obtained within the 60-day invitation period. This change of approach is made as a result of the decision of TAPA v. Minister for Immigration, Citizenship, Migrant Services and Multicultural Affairs FCCA 686. The Minister will administer the Migration Regulations 1994 in accordance with the decision in TAPA, but the Minister reserves the right to make submissions in a court that TAPA was wrongly decided. You will need to provide a copy of this skills assessment with your application. For medical and legal practitioners, we also accept the following as proof of a skills assessment: full or unconditional or general medical registration with the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, conditional specialist registration with the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. This only allows you to practice in your speciality. You need no further training or supervision, admission to practice law in the relevant state or territory. Your skills assessment must have been obtained in the 3 years before the date of your invitation. If the assessment was for a shorter period, that period must not have passed. If your skills were assessed on the basis of a qualification you got in Australia when you held a student visa, the qualification must be from studying a course registered on CRICOS. Now, let's talk about age for 190 visa. You must be aged under 45 when we invite you to apply for the visa. You can still apply for the visa if you turn 45 after we invite you to apply. If you turn 45 after you submit your EOI but before we invite you to apply, you will not be invited to apply. The subclass 190 is a points-tested visa. When you submit your EOI in Skill Select, you will be given an indicative point score based on the claims you have made. If you do not obtain a score of 65 points, you will not be invited to apply for this visa. If we do invite you to apply for the visa, your invitation will state the number of points that you must score when we assess your application for grant of the visa. When you lodge your application, you must provide evidence supporting your claims. To check how points can be awarded, refer to the points calculator. You must have level of English language at the time of invitation. You must have at least competent English. For more details, I will make a separate video for you. Let's talk about meet the skills, health, meet our character requirements. Your occupation must be on the relevant list of eligible skilled occupations for the 190 skilled nominated visa. You and any family who apply for the visa with you must meet Australia health requirement. If requested, family members not accompanying you to Australia might also need to meet Australia health requirement. You and family members aged 16 years and over who apply for the visa with you must meet Australia character requirement. Family members not accompanying you to Australia must also meet the character requirement. If you or any family members owe the Australian government money, you or they must have paid it back or arranged to pay it back. If you are 18 years of age or older, you must have read or had explained to you the life in Australia and confirm you will respect the Australian way of life and obey Australian laws when you sign an Australian values statement. You might not be eligible for this visa if you have had a visa cancelled or refused while you were in Australia. Check if visa cancellation affects your eligibility. Now, let's understand steps before apply for visa. First step is before you apply, you must submit an expression of interest through Skill Select to let them know you want to apply for this visa. They prefer that you have any health checks before you apply for the visa. If you need help with your EOI, you can use a registered migration agent or legal practitioner. For information on how to find someone to help you, see who can help you with your application. Your occupation must be on the relevant list of eligible skilled occupations for the skilled nominated, Subclass 190, visa. You must have a suitable skills assessment at the time they invite you to apply. The assessment must be undertaken by an assessing authority listed against your occupation in the list of eligible skilled occupations. You might have to pay for the assessment. To be eligible for a visa, your skills assessment must have been obtained within the 3 years before the date of invitation. If the assessment was for a shorter period, that period must not have passed. They can't accept a skills assessment issued more than 3 years before the invitation date. If your skills were assessed on the basis of a qualification you got in Australia when you held a student visa, the qualification must be from studying a course registered on CRICOS. For medical practitioners, they accept evidence of registration issued by the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. You must hold either unconditional or general medical registration. Conditional specialist registration, which allows you to practice only in your particular specialty with no further training or supervision requirements. You must show that you hold this registration at the time they invite you to apply. A suitable skills assessment for barristers and solicitors is evidence of admission to practice as a lawyer in an Australian state or territory. The relevant legal admissions authority must have admitted you to practice at the time they invite you to apply. You must be able to obtain at least 65 points on our points test to be eligible for this visa. If you cannot obtain 65 points, we will not invite you to apply. If we invite you to apply for the visa, you must prove the claims you make in your EOI when we assess your application. Use the points calculator to check how many points you might score. Check that you meet all other eligibility criteria for the visa. If they invite you to apply for the visa, you will have to support the claims you make in your EOI as well as other criteria if you submit an application. See what documents you will need to prove your claims before you submit your EOI in the Gather Documents section. Submit your EOI via Skills Select. You can submit it from within or outside Australia. Your EOI is not a visa application. There is no fee for submitting an EOI. Select the skill nominated, Subclass 190, visa. You will receive an email confirming your EOI has been submitted. Skill Select will estimate your point score based on the claims made in your EOI. You must have an estimated score of at least 65 points to be invited to apply for this visa. Once your EOI is submitted, it will be visible to state and territory governments. If you have the skills they need, a state or territory government agency might nominate you for the visa. If you are nominated, you will get an invitation to apply for this visa. An EOI is not a visa application. If you submit an EOI in Australia and your current visa is about to expire, you must apply for another visa to stay in Australia lawfully. You are not eligible for a bridging visa because the EOI is not a visa application. You are only eligible for a bridging visa after you are invited and apply for this visa. Let them know through Skill Select if you want to apply for a different skilled visa, your circumstances change. For example, if you change your occupation or your family structure changes, you could score more points. For example, you have completed a higher qualification or gained new work experience. Your employment circumstances change and you are no longer working at least 20 hours per week in your nominated occupation. You must be able to meet the point score on your invitation letter. If we invite you to apply or you will not be granted a visa, Skill Select will update your indicative point score if you make changes to your EOI. You can change your EOI at any time before we invite you to apply for a visa. They allocate places for the Skilled Migration Program to meet the Australian Government's migration planning levels. Once invited, you have 60 calendar days to apply for the visa. They cannot extend this time. You could receive an invitation up to 2 years after submitting an EOI. If they invite you to apply, you will receive an email from Skill Select. Getting an invitation does not mean you will be granted the visa. The invitation will include the number of points you must score based on your EOI claims. After you apply for the visa, you must show that you can meet the point score on your invitation and can meet all other eligibility criteria. If you do not apply for the visa after 2 invitations, your EOI will be removed from Skill Select. They will not process your visa application if you are 45 at the time of your invitation. If you can't show you meet the point score on your invitation or the other visa criteria, then do not apply for the visa. Your EOI will be suspended if an invitation is issued, but you can update information once the 60-day invitation period has passed. If this is your second invitation, you will have to submit another EOI if you still want the visa. Only some people can help you with your application. If you appoint someone to give you immigration assistance, they must be a registered migration agent, a legal practitioner, or an exempt person. You can appoint anyone to receive documents on your behalf relating to your visa matter. Now, let's gather your documents for visa. You will need to provide documents to support the claims you make in your EOI and show you meet the other visa criteria. Provide accurate information. See what may happen if you can't prove your identity or do not provide true information. Provide the pages of your current passport showing your photo, personal details, and passport issue and expiry dates. Also provide a national identity card, if you have one, proof of change of name. Documents that prove a change of name include a marriage or divorce certificate, change of name documents from an Australian registry of births, deaths, and marriages, or the relevant overseas authority, documents that show other names you have been known by, if you are or have been married, widowed, divorced, or permanently separated. Provide proof such as divorce documents, death certificates, separation documents, or statutory declarations. If your partner or dependent children are not included in this application, tell us the reason why. For example, they already hold Australian citizenship or are a permanent resident. Provide an Australian police certificate if you have spent a total of 12 months or more in Australia in the last 10 years since you turned 16. They only accept complete disclosure national police certificates issued by the Australian Federal Police. They do not accept standard disclosure certificates or national police certificates issued by Australian state or territory police. For immigration purposes, Australian police certificates are valid for 12 months from the date of issue. Also provide an overseas police certificate from every country, including your home country, where you spent a total of 12 months or more in the last 10 years since you turned 16, military service records or discharge papers if you served in the armed forces of any country. Complete and provide the following forms: Form 80 Personal Particulars for Assessment including Character Assessment, Form 1221 Additional Personal Particulars Information. Provide proof you have at least competent English at time of invitation for this visa. They need to see evidence of your partner's identity in relationship with you. Provide identity documents and photos. character documents, marriage certificate, if applicable, documents about other relationships, if applicable. For de facto relationship, provide either evidence that your relationship is registered by an Australian state or territory, enough documents to prove you have been in a de facto relationship with your partner for at least 12 months before you apply. For both married and de facto applicants, you must provide evidence that you are in a genuine and continuing relationship. Evidence can include but is not limited to joint bank account statements, billing accounts in joint names, joint leases or mortgages, documents that show your partner has lived at the same address as you. You don't have to provide any documents to prove functional English if your partner is a citizen of and holds a valid passport from the United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, the United States, Canada, New Zealand. Otherwise, provide proof your partner has functional English. If you can't show us your partner has functional English, you will need to pay the second installment of the visa application charge when we ask you to, for every dependent 18 years old or younger who is applying with you. Provide copies of birth certificates or the family book showing the names of both parents of all your dependent children, copies of the adoption paper, if applicable. You must get consent for any applicant under 18 years of age to migrate to Australia from anyone who has a legal right to decide where the child lives and is not coming to Australia with the child. They must complete either Form 1229 consent form to grant an Australian visa to a child under the age of 18 years, statutory declaration giving their consent for the child to migrate to Australia on this visa. Alternatively, you can show us an Australian court order that allows your child to migrate to Australia, or that the laws of your home country allow them to migrate. Include an identity document that shows the signature and photo of the person who completed the form or declaration, such as a passport or driver's license, adoption papers or other court documents if applicable. You don't have to prove that your dependent under 18 years of age has functional English. Note, if your child is likely to turn 18 while your application is being processed, you will need to provide evidence they are dependent on you. See the section Dependents over 18 documents below for further information. A child who turns 18 while your application is being processed and who is not dependent on you cannot satisfy the criteria for this visa. To include your child who is over 18 in your visa application, they must be over 18 years of age but not yet turned 23, and dependent on you or your partner, or over 23 years of age and unable to earn a living to support themselves due to physical or cognitive limitations and dependent on you or your partner. If your child is likely to turn 23 while your application is being processed, you will need to provide evidence they are dependent on you due to disability. Provide identity documents about their other relationships, if applicable. You must also provide proof the child is dependent on you, proof of your relationship with the dependent such as a birth certificate or adoption papers. A completed Form 47A details of a child or other dependent family member aged 18 years or over, proof of financial dependency such as bank statements, money transfers and rent receipts, if the child is aged 23 or is likely to turn 23 while your application is being processed. You must also provide a report from a qualified medical practitioner that states they are dependent on you or your partner due to the total or partial loss of their bodily or mental functions. Note, a child who turns 23 while your application is being processed and who does not meet these requirements cannot satisfy the criteria for this visa. You don't have to provide any documents to prove functional English if your dependent is a citizen of and holds a valid passport from the United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, the United States, Canada, New Zealand. Otherwise, provide proof your dependent has functional English. If you can't show us your dependent has functional English, you will need to pay the second installment of the visa application charge when they ask you to. You must provide documents that support the claims you made in your EOI. To check the documents you need, use the points table. Depending on your claims, this could include evidence of your skills assessment, English language skills, Australian and/or overseas skilled employment, educational qualifications, satisfying the Australian study requirement, specialist education, accredited community language, study in regional Australia, partner skills, professional year in Australia. Delegates of the Minister will now accept a suitable skills assessment for an applicant's nominated skilled occupation which has been obtained. Within the 60-day invitation period, this change of approach is made as a result of the decision of TAPA v. Minister for Immigration, Citizenship, Migrant Services and Multicultural Affairs, 2021, FCCA 686, TAPA. The Minister will administer the Migration Regulations 1994 in accordance with the decision in TAPA, but the Minister reserves the right to make submissions in a court that TAPA was wrongly decided. One of these certificates issued by the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, unconditional or general medical registration, conditional specialist registration, which allows you to practice only in your specialty with no further training or supervision requirements. You must be registered at the time we invite you to apply, proof of admission to practice as a lawyer in the relevant state or territory. You must be admitted to practice at the time we invite you to apply. You must provide documents to prove all of the claims you made in your EOI. Use the points table to check the documents you need. To nominate someone to receive your correspondence, use Form 956A appointment or withdrawal of an authorized recipient, provide immigration assistance, use Form 956 appointment of a registered migration agent, legal practitioner, or exempt person, upload your written notification or your forms to IMI account. Have all non-English documents translated into English. Translators in Australia must be accredited by the National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters. Translators outside Australia do not have to be accredited. But on each translation, they must include their full name, address and telephone number, qualifications and experience in the language they are translating. These details must be in English. Note, you do not need to have any document certified. Scan or photograph all documents, English and non-English, in color. The scans and photos must be clear. If a document is more than one page, save it all as one file. Now, let's have a look at apply for the visa. When you have your invitation, you can apply online. You can be in or outside Australia. You have 60 days from the date of your invitation to apply for the visa. Provide accurate information. See what may happen when you cannot prove your identity or do not provide true information. Apply for this visa online in IMI account. Log into your SkillSelect account. In SkillSelect, click on the Apply for Visa button. This will take you to our online system, IMI account. Log in or create an IMI account. Your IMI account login and password will not be the same as your SkillSelect login and password. Attach your documents. Pay the application charge. We will not process your application until you pay the first installment of the visa application charge. Note your transaction reference number. Now, let's have a look at after you apply. They will let you know when they have received your application. If you are granted a bridging visa, you will receive notification of your visa grant. They do not give updates on applications within the standard processing time. You can check if we need more information from you in IMI account. If you are in Australia, you do not have to tell us if you want to travel outside Australia while we process your application. This is because you can be outside Australia when we make a decision, but if you leave Australia, make sure your visa allows you to return. To see if you can return on your current visa, check Vivo. If you applied outside Australia, don't arrange travel to Australia, leave your job or sell your home until we advise you in writing that you have been granted the visa. If you didn't have health examinations before you applied, they will let you know if you need them. Check IMI account. They might ask for biometrics. They will let you know if you need to provide them. If you did not attach all documents when you applied, attach them as soon as you can in IMI account. They might also ask you to provide more information. However, they are not obliged to do so and may make a decision on your application without requesting more documents. Make sure you stay lawful in Australia by holding a valid visa while they process your application. When you applied for this visa, you were granted a bridging visa A, BVA. If your current visa expires before they decide on your application, the BVA will come into effect. You can stay in Australia on the BVA while they process your new visa application. Do not ask to have the visa you currently hold cancelled. If your visa is cancelled, you will be staying in Australia unlawfully. Your BVA will cease. If you need to pay a second installment, pay it when they send you the invoice. You can add members of the family unit to your application after you apply, but before they decide on your visa. Use Form 1436 adding an additional applicant after lodgement. Pay using IMI account. Attach the form and supporting documents to your IMI account. Family members who apply for the visa must meet our health and character requirements. Family members who are not coming to Australia do have to meet our character requirement and might have to meet our health requirement. If your child is born after you submit your application but before they decide on your visa, you must tell us as soon as possible. Find out what to do. Your child is born after you apply. You must tell us as soon as possible if you made a mistake on your application. Complete Form 1023 notification of incorrect answers and attach it to your application in IMI account. Things you need to let them know about after you have applied include changes to your phone number, email, address, or passport, changes to your marital or de facto status, the birth of a child. You want to withdraw your application. Now, let's talk about visa outcome. You can be in or outside Australia when they decide your visa application but not in immigration clearance. They will let you know our decision in writing. If they grant your visa, they will tell you your visa grant number, the date your visa starts, your visa conditions. If applicable, keep a copy of the decision. If they refuse your visa, they will tell you why we refused the visa, whether you have a right to a review of the decision. We will not refund the application charge if we refuse your application. Coming to Australia. If you are outside Australia when the visa is granted, you must enter Australia before a date that they specify on your visa grant letter. Before you leave, check your travel documents. You must have a valid visa to enter Australia, a valid passport or other travel document. At the Australia border, completing an incoming passenger card. All people arriving in Australia must complete the incoming passenger card. You will be given this card on board. If you want to leaving the airport faster, they have an automated process that uses facial recognition technology and your e-passport. You might be able to leave the airport faster if you use SmartGate. What you must do on this visa. You and your family members must obey Australian laws. How long you can stay. This is a permanent visa. It lets you stay in Australia indefinitely. Traveling on your visa, you can travel to and from Australia for 5 years from the date we grant the visa. After 5 years you will need a resident return visa, subclasses 155 or 157, to re-enter Australia as a permanent resident. To see when the 5 years ends, use Vivo, proving you have a visa. If you wish to provide evidence you have a visa and conditions to someone, use Vivo, bringing family. As an Australian permanent resident, you might be able to sponsor eligible family to come to Australia, to find a visa for your family member. Explore visa options. Becoming an Australian citizen. After a certain time, you might be eligible for Australian citizenship. For citizenship purposes, your permanent residence starts on the day they grant the visa. If you were in Australia, you entered Australia on this visa. If you were outside Australia when they granted it. Please like and subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to get new video updates.